Greetings, brothers and sisters. So, I watched this movie, Nightmare Alley. I don't know if I'm going to repeat myself because I took some video clips, just a few video clips, to just show some of the symbols that were important to my narrative. But it's just loaded with occult stuff, demonic stuff, and devilish stuff, and Illuminati and Freemasonic stuff. So it's not worth pointing everything out because you'd have to point out the whole movie. And it's not what I do anymore here. I think I say that in the clips here coming up. And then I just want to go over how this, in some odd way, affects Alec Baldwin. Like the protagonist in this movie has, sort of an Alec Baldwin ending. And how this relates to Hollywood and it being nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars. So let me show you the clips and the symbols first. And then I'll move on to the longer narrative about the movie. Greetings, brothers and sisters. So, I watched the movie Nightmare Alley over 2 or 3 days, little bits and pieces of it. And, it has been nominated for Best Picture, and it's Benicio del Toro, is that the guy's name? And he made Hellboy and that, that water movie, the whatever the water guy was, Loch Ness monster looking guy who ends up having relations with one of the main characters. But he loves monsters, and he loves devil stuff, and there's always Illuminati stuff. And this is about a carnival. I'm going to just show you a few scenes and then talk about the plot of the movie. It's just, it's not worth watching, obviously. And I'm going to talk about it being nominated for an Academy Award. And it's, really twisted. Like, it's a well-made movie for what he did. Like, the guy makes quality movies that are compelling with, good production values and things like that. But it's just disturbing and it makes you feel bad. There's movies that are well-made that aren't, uplifting, or they're, twisted in some way. And so there's that dude from Apocalypse Now and The Passion of Christ, whatever his name is. Don't care. Don't tell me. Don't need to know. And he's in charge of the carny. And he has a bunch of babies in formaldehyde. And this one had a third eye. And it killed its mother on the operating table because it was sort of below. I forget he's explaining it here.
Like a calf, eye follows you around like in portraits.
It's just disturbing, and it's important to something else I'm going to show you in a bit. So here he is. This guy learns a bunch of ways to manipulate and grift people, con people, and pretend he's a psychic. This is Bradley Cooper. The other guy was William Dafoe. And so he is, he's got the Illuminati eye here, and he's blindfolded. But he's he's a grifter. He's conning people, and it ultimately backfires on him. And one of the people that's in the audience is Cate Blanchett, and she plays a sort of a twisted psychologist who challenges him, and he's able to humiliate her, which comes back to haunt him later. But then he goes to see her. And he gets in the elevator, and I've said before, elevators go to hell, right? This one's actually going up. Stairways go to heaven, elevators go to hell. That's one of the rules of Hollywood.
I was thinking you and I can make a pretty big dent in this town.
And so he ends up talking to himself here. He's rehearsing what he's going to say to Cate Blanchett. You can see he's got the one Illuminati eye. The whole movie's got this stuff in it. Like, I'm showing you little bits and pieces because it doesn't really matter. Like, that's from 5 years ago. Like, this would be important 5 years ago, but we're in the quickening phase, so it doesn't really matter. But I found this interesting, and then I want to talk about the other aspect of this sort of depraved movie. So you see that it says 6, and it has a red light, and there's a pyramid here. It's sort of a pyramid that's at the top of the elevator, and that's going to open up. But it says 6 here, and he's about to meet this woman who eventually is going to ruin him. And then it says 6 again, right? So now there's a 6. So there's 2 6s. And then he crosses it and the 6 reemerges. So it's 666. He's, all this stuff, right? Like I said, I could go through this thing. There's so much symbolism in it and just, all these different types of archetypes. And it's just loaded with occult and devil worship and Illuminati type of stuff, Freemasonic stuff. And again, those are videos I used to make 5 years ago that are no longer as important. They're not really all that significant now because, things have moved on, right? Like we're in a different stage where pointing out symbolism isn't really all that important. So I want to comment on this because I noticed that this was nominated for Best Picture. And Benicio del Toro is a good filmmaker from a technical, production values, storytelling type of, suck you into the plot and character development. Like some movies just suck across the board. It's poorly made. The person sucks as a movie maker or a storyteller. And that's not the case with this guy. I've seen a bunch of his films now, or 2 or 3 of them. I guess this is the 3rd one. And he makes quality films on a technical level. But they're always saturated with depression and degradation and satanic and Illuminati. I mean, just all this kind of stuff. Like all the things that we know about Hollywood, he has in his movies. And they, make you feel bad. They're not uplifting. They have a negative effect on you. They're always dark. Like this one's particularly dark. I've talked about this where you really can't even see because it's so dingy. The lighting is so poor through most of the movie that you can barely see what's going on. I've seen this over and over again now. The darker movies now that they're putting out there where the lighting is poor and it's just, it's hard to see what's even going on, right? It's not very clear. It's sort of hazy because of the darkness and the way they shoot the movie. And that's the case with this movie. And spoiler alert, I'm going to, do a brief synopsis of the main storyline and plot lines that are important to the discussion of what I'm saying here on a systemic and a Hollywood agenda and everything that's happening in the world today. Certainly, with all these Oscar-nominated movies, if you watch just the trailers of the Oscar-nominated movies, you'll see that every storyline, every narrative, every demographic, every evil that Hollywood pushes is being represented in some form in one of these movies that's nominated. And this one was about devil worship and the pointlessness of life, which is a big Hollywood theme. George Clooney is one of the pillars of putting out movies that show you that life is pointless. And people are basically born evil. So the movie starts and Bradley Cooper is dropping a corpse into the floorboards in a beat-up old house in the 1940s. It's when World War II is just started. And it's wrapped in blankets and he sets the house on fire and he hits the road with some suitcases. You later learn that he's murdered his father, which they hint at throughout the movie. But it's, kind of important to the context of the movie. But he's a murderer. The way he murdered his father is he takes the blanket off his father and he watches him freeze to death as he puts the blanket around himself. So, it's kind of savage. And he's murders a few people throughout the movie who get in his way. And, one guy's his mentor who he gave some wood alcohol to. And he steals his book, his Flim Flam book, on how to use, basically some sort of mentalist approach to pretend that you're a psychic and a spiritual person, which is always a bad thing because there's real mediums out there. There's a real spirit world. And people who flim-flam that are doing a disservice because it makes people not trust that there's really a God and there's really spiritual energy. So people who con their way, and many religions fall into this category, who con their way and try to, gain financial benefits from pretending to be, some kind of spiritual person are, bad people. And so he ends up at a carnival and he goes inside and there's what's called the geek. And it's a, very disheveled, dirty, filthy human being who William Dafoe is the guy who runs the carnival, says that, you can get to see the guy feed. And he throws a chicken down, the guy eats the chicken live, right? And so he talks about whether the guy's, you know, a human being or an animal or whatever it is, right? And this is going to play the sort of central theme. It's going to come back a couple of times, and then at the end of the movie. And so Bradley Cooper gets set up at the carnival. He ends up doing some work, and he ends up, hooking up with this psychic lady who reads tarot cards, and her husband is the Flim Flam guy, and he learns this craft. He murders the guy, and he gets with this one girl who's sort of the damsel. It's played by Mara Rooney, who is the daughter of the Rooney family that I believe owns the Giants. Is that right? The Giants or the Pittsburgh Steelers? What is that? In fact, it's both of them. I just looked it up on Wikipedia. Actresses Kate Mara and Rooney Mara are the daughters of Timothy Christopher Mara, the vice president of player evaluation at the New York Giants. And it goes on to say here that Mara's mother's family founded the Pittsburgh Steelers, and her father's family founded the New York Giants. So she comes from football royalty, and she looks very dudeish. She looks very masculine. She, I think, played in that The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo movie and a few other movies. But she just seems kind of dudeish, right? And so Bradley Cooper promises to take her away, and he's got a scam that they can run on real wealthy people. And the guy who taught him these dark arts had said, you don't want to get sucked into it and do private shows and start believing you have psychic powers. Like you just, it always ends up bad. And he has this book that has, all the keys into manipulating people, this little book he carries around. And so the next scene is when Bradley Cooper is doing these, these shows, and he's wearing the Eye of Horus, the Illuminati eye, the Ajna chakra that has all this spiritual power, which shouldn't be messed around with by people who haven't developed good character qualities and a deep connection to God, because it just unleashes havoc. And so that's what it is doing now when you have people who are, depraved in nature, and they have somehow tapped into some of this power that's available in the third eye, right? The Eye of Horus, as it's said in Egyptian lore. But he's going, he's doing a show, and Cate Blanchett comes at him and tries to expose that he's running a scam, and he figures her out, he humiliates her. And then there's a man that's with her who's an important figure, a judge, who's lost a son, and he agrees to do a private show with them. And his girlfriend is, Rooney Mara is like bummed at it. And Cate Blanchett is so manly herself. So the two primary romantic figures in this movie are both very manly and kind of hard, and they're just it's just a dark and brutal movie. So he agrees to do the show, even though Rooney Mara's like, you don't do these shows, we're never supposed to do this. It's like breaks the whole rules of the book and all these things. And then the psychic woman who is married to the guy who trained him shows up, and she has tarot cards, and she does a reading, and she says it's going to be a disaster if you do this this show. And then he pulls his own tarot cards, and he pulls a Hangman inverted, which is a bad card for a variety of reasons, which will mean his devastation. But he goes and does the show anyway. He meets with Cate Blanchett before that, and that's when the 666 elevator thing happens. And he makes a deal with her, and she asks him to expose some of his inner secrets, which was, the murder of his father and this other guy. She tape records him, and she's given him information about this judge, and he goes and scams them. And there's his wife, and he says that you guys will all be reunited in heaven, and she ultimately kills herself and her husband because she wants to be reunited with her son because of what this scammer said to him. But before they die, they hook him up with this criminal who's, an unstable guy who forced some woman to get an abortion. He's got all this skeletons in his closet, and he, demands that the guy exhume or bring back in a spirit form this woman he wants to see. And he gets Rooney Mara to pretend to be this woman, and it goes south, and he's got to kill the guy and his bodyguard, and Rooney Mara leaves him, and he goes to see Cate Blanchett, who's taken all his money, and she scammed him because of how he humiliated her. and she calls security and shoots him, and he tries to strangle her, but before he does, security comes, and he runs off bleeding and broken, right? And he returns to the carnival, and before he had left, he had a sort of last dinner with William Dafoe character. And William Dafoe says, this is how you get a person to be one of these geeks. And so you find a real broken down homeless person, maybe someone who's been traumatized by the war, who's an alcoholic. He says you go down to Nightmare Alley, which is, you know, in a time that's sort of post-depression, is just a really seedy place where all these homeless, broken people are living. And Bradley Cooper never drank because his dad drank, and, you know, he was somebody who was proud of not drinking. But then when he hooks up with Cate Blanchett, he starts to drink, which is, you know, part of his downfall. And so the guy says, you get one of these homeless guys and you get him drunk and you put a drop of opium. You know, they had opium back in those days, back in the 20s when they first made Coca-Cola, it used to have cocaine in it, right? And you could buy drops of opium and things, like doctors had just raw opium. And so you take a drop of opium and you put it in the person's, the homeless guy's alcohol and get him addicted. And then you say, hey, we need a real geek because the guy's not willing to eat raw food and, you know, live in a cage and things. And so you get the guy to be a geek for a while, but you don't, you know, the guy's not willing to do all these things. And then after he's addicted, you let him get strung out and need the opium, and you starve him or whatever. And then, you know, when he's at his sort of like breaking point, you throw a live chicken in there and the guy will eat it for you. You know, like it's just some sick way of, I mean, it's so like evil in terms of mind manipulation and all these things. So the guy shows up at this carnival, and William Dafoe has been bought out. There's another guy there. And the guy says he doesn't want a mentalist act, and Bradley Cooper smells bad, and he's like homeless, a beard, and just a complete wreck, right? His ear was shot, like he's deformed now. And the guy says, I do have one position for you. And he says, what's that? He goes, you can, you know, be a geek. You ever heard of a geek? And Bradley Cooper starts to cry, and he said, I was born to play that, you know, so. And that's how the movie ended, with him just de-evolving into this completely, you know, animalistic. The geek has a lot, you know, the geek he interacts with, there's just all this, you know, he's basically an animal, someone who no longer can function. And it's a complete, like, bummer. Like, it just, I mean, everything about the thing is dark and depraved. There's not one character that's, you know, that's salvageable, that's, you know, can be redeemed in the whole movie. And it's just a, you know, a dark, twisted, demonic, devilish tale. And I was thinking about how Alec Baldwin is now being considered. He got arrested, or they, you know, thought he was a hobo when he was in England. And I talked about how he looked like a homeless guy. And so, like, Alec Baldwin is actually descending into the world of geekdom. And the movie was like almost like a little bit about what's happened to him, right? Someone who was on the top of his game, and he's now being considered homeless guy wandering around the streets making Instagram videos in England. But the main reason I'm making this video is because it's been nominated for an Oscar, and this is typical Hollywood stuff where they really push these demonic, devil-worshipping, depraved themes. I mean, they do it in so many movies. They love this guy, Benicio del Toro. His movies always get nominated, and I can see from a technical level that he makes, you know, quality movies in one way, but this kind of message should never be pushed, right? I mean, it's just, it's horrible. Like, it's worse than a horror movie because, you know, it's so dark and so twisted. You know, flim-flam people who con people, these grifters, I mean, they're just, you know, the worst type of people, right? And they play on people's hopes and dreams, and they crush people and hurt people. And they just, you know, all of these people in the movie have a negative effect on each other. And they're all empty and soulless and things, murderous and, you know, conniving and just the worst of the worst. And the reason why they can make these movies in a more quality way is because they don't understand wholesome, innocent, spiritual, you know, just regular human beings who are trying to, you know, be better people, working to improve themselves, people with good character qualities. They struggle making movies about such things. Good family life, good marriages, loving people, spiritual people. They just can't make those movies, especially now. I mean, very seldom do they make a movie about something uplifting that's really uplifting and, you know, based in reality, not some Hollywood BS thing like Full House, right? Or something like that. They pretend that something's wholesome when it underneath it is just so sick. I mean, you know, Bob Saget with his multi-fractured skull video I just made today. I was really originally going to make those videos together, but it's just, you know, such a twisted and depraved place, Hollywood, and just as a concept, and what they applaud and what they award and what they pat on the back is the worst of the worst, right? That's why I always talk about having to, you know, to connect to God in a deeper way, because everything you're getting in the news, everything you're getting on an entertainment level, and most people themselves who claim to be truthers or claim to be religious, they're obsessed with the darkness. They're obsessed with what's twisted and evil, and they love the drama, and so they claim to be godly people, but they almost never think about God. They don't really feel love. You know, they claim to be religious and things, but they really like the darkness, and that's just, you know, what's going on with humanity right now, and connecting to God in a true way internally, and then getting back to just wholesome and basic things. I mean, you have to balance all this stuff out because of the way that the world's going, and what they're pushing on everybody is, you know, depression and depravity and loneliness and, you know, demonic stuff. Big egos in a selfish life, right? And it just never works out, right? We know how Hollywood turns. I just look at Alec Baldwin like he's the, you know, the main character in this movie. But anyways, only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano definitely reporting from the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.